That's the reason why I didn't turn on the lights. We really wanted to everybody to see the video, and I really wanted to just acknowledge Bernadette Gray and all the work that she's done, and an amazing LGBT trailblazer. And if you don't know who she is, you should. And you can go to the Chicago Gay History website. You would Google that to find that link, but it's very basic, and find all the information. So we're going to start first with David. David Munar is currently the president and CEO of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. He originally is from New Mexico, Albuquerque, and David moved to Illinois when he attended Northwestern University. Out of college, he started to work at a not-for-profit, helping with, at the time, the recent amnesty law, the late 80s. And so I want to welcome David Munar, everyone. So, you know, the stage interview is set so that people can really connect with people that we already know or that we know of. So David is one of those people that everybody knows who David Munar is. You know, he's the president and CEO of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. He's had a long history in LGBT organizing with ALMA as the president at the time. And so we wanted to kind of go back into what triggered and what happened that got him involved in social justice and involved at the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. So maybe you want to say something. Take
a breath. Thanks, Mandy. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see such a great response. And I'm just thrilled to be in the village, and it's really cool.
So, David, all right. So, what got you started? What was the organization that you worked with, and what were you doing at that not-for-profit before you went to the AIDS Foundation of Chicago? You were doing amnesty work. What was that?
Yeah. So, you know, my first job out of college was working for an immigrant rights organization that was working with individuals that were in the last stage of receiving their amnesty. So there was an amnesty in the late 80s, early 90s, granted by President Reagan. And for individuals that came forward that had been in the country, could prove they were in the country for so long, they had to apply for amnesty, they had to do citizenship classes, they had to prove that they didn't have a criminal record, they had to do English as a second language, and then they had to reapply and finish the process. So we were finding, so I kind of came in at the last stage when folks had gone through this whole process, had paid their money, had done their English classes, their citizenship, but if they failed to apply, so nice government program, if they failed to apply for that last stage, they would revert back to undocumented. So we were canvassing all over Rogers Park, we were going to churches, we were canvassing at CTA, trying to let people know that if they were in the amnesty process, that they had to finish, they had to do that last stage and not revert back to undocumented. So it was a really interesting project. And it was just, you know, amazing how many people had no idea that they still had one more hurdle to go. And we reached a lot of people, but you know, we don't know how many we missed.
And the outreach at the time obviously is very different. So this is all pre-Facebook, pre-email. I'm not calling you old, David. I'm just laying down the facts. And so you've been with the AIDS Foundation for 23 years. The organization has been around for 28, right? They're moving into the 28th anniversary. So pretty much you've seen the organization grow. How do you first get to the AIDS Foundation of Chicago? Like, and what is your role at that first entry?
Sure. So I went to school at Northwestern, and at Northwestern I was really, you know, it was kind of my first opportunity to be away from home, and really my first chance to be out, you know. And I got immediately involved in the Gay and Lesbian Student Association, and started to meet. It was the first exposure to activists. It was really a great opportunity to be out and to start thinking about, activism, political activism. So, on campus, I'm going to answer your question, but on campus we, we're doing things like trying to, the school had recently adopted a non-discrimination policy that added sexual orientation. And so we were trying to test the policy. So at the time, the armed forces were recruiting on campus. As you know, until very recently, they discriminated against gays and lesbians. So we were trying to put this to the test and trying to get them off campus. And through that advocacy work, I also met really incredibly strong student organizers working on apartheid. Because at the time, South Africa was apartheid government, and we were trying to divest the university's money from apartheid. And through that work, I met some really cool people, including Mark Ishar, who was a grad student at the time. He ended up becoming the second policy director at the AIDS Foundation. And so I was graduating. He said, "Oh, there's an entry-level job, AIDS Foundation Chicago. You should apply." And I did. And I started there probably 6 months after graduating, and it was very entry level. It was doing accounts payables, account receivables, doing the board stuff, grant making. We were a 12-person office, but it was fantastic. It was my first nonprofit. Kind of after, besides the amnesty piece, which was all field work, kind of my first administrative nonprofit job. And I really wanted to get involved in something around social justice. I mean, kind of my exposure, the reason I talk about campus is kind of really energized me to be involved in, helping communities, and particularly communities I was affected, that I was part of. So that's how I got to AIDS Foundation. 8 jobs ago.
8 jobs.
So yeah, I've really worked myself up the ladder.
So what was your connection at the time to HIV/AIDS when you're approached about working in this organization at the time when you're entering the AIDS Foundation of Chicago?
Yeah, so when I started, I was 21 years old. I really didn't know a whole lot about HIV. I think I got my education about HIV and health systems and HIV stigma and kind of the really fragmented health and human service safety net at AIDS Foundation Chicago. I also met incredibly powerful people there, many of whom are dead now. I mean, one of my first jobs in the office was, there used to be an association of people living with HIV in Chicago. And it was a group that had been about 100 members strong and had whittled down to about 50. When I got to the agency, it was down to like 12. And within a year, there were 2 of the founders left. And when the last one died, it was my job to go through all the files that they had left and, kind of clean them out. It was just gone. So I really got my introduction to HIV/AIDS at the agency. I thought I knew a lot about HIV/AIDS, but I didn't know very much.
A very interesting piece, right? The history of even the organization. David, you've been very open about your status as HIV positive, and when we talked before, I was curious to know at which point in that history did you find out you were HIV positive? Do you want to share that?
Yeah, so Manny, you were really interested in kind of this connection. I mean, I was already at the AIDS Foundation Chicago. I was still really junior in my career. I had recently begun a job working in information referral, and this was '94, when many of you were born. But at the time, the phones rang off the hook, and it was our job to answer the phones, answer their questions, help connect people to services, enroll people in case management. Most of the people that I was enrolling in case management survived 6 to 9 months. So we were really catching people at the very end, and the phone would not stop ringing. I mean, it was continuous. And actually, I mean, the calls were also really so painful. I mean, there were people that we were talking to that were dealing with their HIV diagnosis, there were family members. I remember one call vividly, mom called, she was like, my 23-year-old son is HIV positive, he and his boyfriend live with me, I don't know what to do, I'm so, we're so afraid, it's so stigmatizing. So I was all ready to just help them, like to really, and then she says, it's okay, I already kicked them out of the house. I just need to know, do I need to burn the bed? That was what she said. I was like, so I was very professional. I wanted to say, burn the house down. I did. But there was lots of these kinds of really horrific situations. I was also, at the time, had been kind of my first long-term relationship. So I'd been in a relationship for about a year. I was in a clinical study for people who were HIV negative, and it included HIV testing every 6 months. And I tested positive, and I was blown away. I was completely in denial. And then I had to retest, and then I went to my doctor and did a test, and I had my doctor retest. So 4 tests later, I finally started to come to grips with being positive, but it was devastating. It sent me right back in the closet that I was struggling so hard to get out of. And, all of the things that we as queer people deal with in terms of shame and blame and isolation just came flooding back. And in '94, there were no effective treatments. None of the effective treatments that exist today were available then. There were, in the United States, 40,000 people died of AIDS in 1994. And in the year after, 1995, there were 50,000 that died. That was the height of the epidemic. Thankfully, in '96, the cocktail treatment, kind of this combination of treatments came out. But, when they came out, we didn't know if they would last, a day, a month, or a year. I mean, it was so brand new, and many of us were very skeptical, because we had heard about other breakthrough treatments before. So it was a tough time. It was a really tough time.
And you mentioned the closet, right? And then it pushed you right back into the closet. Being around, I would imagine, I think we had the discussion, that being around the type of support system, perhaps that was, you were working at the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, around all this new information coming in about treatments, and maybe even people who are in supportive roles, and you yourself were in that supportive role, right? You were the person picking up that call. How long did it take for you to come out as HIV positive?
It took me a long time. It took me probably 10 good years or more for me to really be able to talk about it without breaking down. I think it was a combination of things. I mean, I think there was so much stigma around HIV everywhere, in the gay community, outside the gay community. I think it was hard for individuals that are working in AIDS, particularly. We were the ones that were supposed to have all the information. We were supposed to guide people and help them. We were supposed to know better, supposedly. And I think it was hard for people that were not, the first wave of folks that were affected by HIV in the 70s and 80s, they didn't know what was going on. I mean, there was HIV wasn't really discovered as a virus until '85. And so there's this whole generation of people that early on that really had no clue that this health emergency was beginning. But I think in the '90s and in the decades after, I think there's been this kind of quiet, sense that if you become infected, you did something wrong. You should have known better, or you were a slut, or you contributed to your own infection. And so I think being part of an AIDS organization and being part of the second wave of the epidemic, I think that, and then I think it's traumatizing. And the HIV diagnosis is very traumatizing. It was very traumatizing then, but it's traumatizing even today. I mean, I don't know if we talked about this, but I talked to, we talk to people at the office all the time, but I got a call from a young man, 23 years old, just a couple weeks ago. Really positive, completely freaked out. I talked to him, I talked to his aunt, I talked to his other aunt. They didn't know what to do, where to turn. He had gone to the doctor. His clinical labs showed that he has 81 T cells, which for anyone that doesn't know, anything below 200 is AIDS diagnosed. At 81 T cells, he has virtually no immune system left. He was probably infected at between 13 and 15. But most tragically, what I found devastating was he had no clue that there's effective treatments, that there's a network of organizations, that he can have a full and happy and rich life ahead of him. No idea. I mean, he was in the same place I was in 1994. He was preparing to die. And I at least had a legitimate reason to prepare to die. I mean, there was nothing going, there was no clear path that I would live past 35. I mean, if it weren't for the treatments that came out in 96, I probably wouldn't be here. But there's so much hope today for someone who tests positive, if they gain access to care, if they stick to their treatment, if they build a support system. I also had to tell him the truth, that his physical health would be really okay. He will enjoy a strong physical life. It will take him a long time to heal the emotional, trauma of living with a lifelong, incurable, stigmatizing disease. That's going to take a long time. But he has a lot of advantages. He has a family that's supporting him. He's surrounded by a loving community, and that makes a world of difference.
What's the turning point? 10 years, right? So what does coming out look like for you? And what changed, or what was going on where you found that coming out happened for you?
I think for me, the turning point was realizing that I was going to survive. I mean, I think 5 years after my infection, I was told I should get on meds, which I was completely against. I was concerned about the side effects. I was not prepared. I was not physically, emotionally prepared to have this daily reminder of HIV. I did everything humanly possible to avoid being on meds. I did acupuncture once a week. I did all vitamins. I got more rest. It sort of helped, but it really didn't. I mean, my health declined. I started to feel, most people with HIV don't feel anything, which is part of the problem, right? You feel fine, but I actually started to feel bad. My energy was getting, my energy level was sinking. The rate of getting infections was higher. I was getting a cold every 2 weeks instead of once a month. I could feel, and my lab numbers were really down. So I had to start treatment. And I finally did it, about 9 years after my infection. But I started to also realize that I was going to live. I responded really well to treatment after the initial, phase that was kind of bumpy. But I think that really was a turning point. I hadn't calibrated the future past 35 or 36, and then I had to. I had to say, oh, well, there's another horizon here. And then, I think I was getting stronger in my advocacy. I started to see how important it was to have other people reassure me about their path, about their infection, about their support system, that the way that they could be accepted in the community or among friends, how they could talk or laugh, or be serious about their own infection. So I think all those things kind of, contributed to a place where I was like, I need to go past this wall. But it wasn't an easy wall to do, and I think it's never easy. I think we're talking about, the person who's queer, you're always coming out. There's always a room you're walking into that you have to, decide. Am I gonna tell them I'm gay or I'm not gay? Am I gonna talk about my partner, not my partner? And HIV is another layer. It's another closet. You're always in that space. You're always in that. Am I gonna go there? But I felt like it was important for me to go there, to do this work. And this is, for better or worse, my calling. So it's been my professional path, but it's also been this personal calling.
And I just want to acknowledge you've done such an amazing job at your calling. So give it up for David. David, you were really instrumental in putting together the National HIV/AIDS Strategy, which is part of President Obama's, one of the highlights in his contributions to HIV/AIDS. What is the strategy? I know that it's a big document, but very briefly for people who don't know. And do you think we're on target now to meet those challenges that were set forth by you and a whole bunch of other people who put that together?
So the story here is that the United States spends billions of dollars internationally on global AIDS. And for, it's like 17 countries that receive U.S. support for global AIDS, they're required to put together a national AIDS plan. And so activists started to review these national AIDS plans and kind of analyze what impact they have made to the movement and how they're involving people with HIV, how they're reforming health systems, how they're expanding access. And as part of this research, I can't take credit for any of it, it was Open Society Institute, found out that there was no, at the time, and this is 2008, there was no U.S. national plan, AIDS plan. And so they wrote a report explaining what are the components that should be included in the national AIDS plan. So a group of activists joined forces. I was part of that group, and we reached out to the Open Society Institute, thanked them for the report, and said, "This is a great report. We're really excited. You've highlighted an important issue. What are you going to do next?" And they said, "Oh no, we're done. We wrote the report. It's over." So we started campaigning. We went to all the presidential candidates in 2008 and asked them if they would commit to a national AIDS plan. We got most of the Democrats, including Barack Obama. And then in October, before the election, we got Senator John McCain committed to a national AIDS plan. And, he lost. Obama won. You know that. And Obama made creation of the plan his #1 priority. Then we worked really hard to make sure that we got the right information in the plan. So the plan is 4 parts. It pledges to reduce new infections by 25% and reduce by half the transmission rates. It pledges to increase the number of individuals that are linked to high-quality continuous medical care who are HIV positive. And it pledges to reduce HIV-related health disparities among gay men and bisexual men, among African Americans and Latinos. And then the 4th part is to improve federal coordination of HIV services. The plan's been instrumental in helping focus the attention of the federal government, local government, state governments around these outcomes. It's a 5-year plan. It was enrolled in 2010. It's going to sunset in 2015. And we're not going to reach targets. We're absolutely not going to. We're not going to reduce new infections by 25%. We're not going to increase the number of people who know they're diagnosed. So one of the goals is that 90% of people with HIV will know their HIV status. We're about 82% right now. We're not going to get there. We're not reducing health disparities. Why? Money. I mean, it's really money. I mean, the Congress has, as you know, in this fiscal climate, cut back a lot of funding. The Obama administration has been able to keep some, increase some small categories of dollars, but they've not been able to increase money significantly enough to reach these targets, which is really sad. So we're gonna hit 2015 and not reach these targets, but the plan has been helpful in holding them accountable, and we're going to continue to try to push towards these outcomes.
Thank you. And one of the things that Bernita said was, creating community, right? And so my last question for you is, what can we do to continue to create community for everyone, right? Regardless of whether you're undocumented, queer, HIV positive, gay, lesbian, trans. What are some things that you see that we could do to create community?
Well, this is a great example. I mean, this room is pretty powerful. Authenticity. I mean, I think one of the blessings of the work I've done is to feel whole. To feel like all the parts of me can coexist. There's Colombian American, gay man, HIV positive, from New Mexico. I mean, I have this like strange mix. But I can, but I don't have to choose. I can be authentic. And I think one of the things that Q Hub, stands for is, that authenticity. I think that's the most important thing. And I think these opportunities where people can share both their similarities as well as celebrate their differences is powerful.
Thank you, David Munar. And David will be back up later for the Q&A. And if you look over for the audience, if you look over up there in the ceiling, there's a text number that you can text your questions to.